Well, hey, everybody. I am so excited about this moment. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. But I have got from Portland, Oregon, the pastor of Bridgetown Church, John Mark Comer. And John Mark, I'm so thankful that you'd come on and take some time with us. And really, as you and I have kind of been chatting this past year, if you guys don't know, I've stalked John Mark Comer. Like, he's probably never had a friend like me, because I randomly got his number from a mutual friend, and I just started hitting him up, leaving him voice memos. And he's probably like, bro, it's kind of inappropriate, man. Like, bro to bro, like you're coming at me pretty hard. So I'm in a spot right now where I'm just so thankful for your voice and how much of an impact you've made in my life. But thank you so much for coming and being a part of VooConf Live, man.
Oh, you are beyond kind, man. And if by coming, you mean clicking a little link on my computer, it's a lot easier than flying, across the country 3,000 miles.
This past fall at Voo Church, we did a collection of talks entitled Restless. And so much of the collection was honestly, I think I was texting at the time, just based on your latest book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And if I'm being really honest with you, the culture at Voo is fast paced. It's charging. I think we try really hard to engage with culture and to keep up. And nothing about your book or anything about your message is against work or against productivity. But
no, not at all.
What you're introducing is a call back to rest. What has this been like for you over the last 3 months of this quarantine experience and whatnot? And just even with the message that you've introduced to the world, do you feel like people, one of the things I heard you teach about one time is this idea that Sabbath is coming for you, a forced Sabbath. Yeah. Has there been any thoughts inside of you like, wow, there's something with the cadence of creation here a little bit that we're slowing down?
Yeah, well, the goofy thing about COVID is it's so different for different people. So if you're an emergency room doctor or a pastor, I have more work now than I've had in years, And if you're on furlough from work or you're a knowledge worker and you don't have little kids, then it's almost like a kind of sabbatical. I was chatting to my mom, who's basically a writer, and, and she was like, she would never say this in public. So let me say it for her to embarrass her. But she's like, I'm loving this. She's an introvert. This is like a long awaited sabbatical for me. She's not leading some large organization or, doesn't have little kids at home. So it's such a different experience for different people, and this is where, for a lot of people, yes, this is kind of like a first introduction into Sabbath, into rest. But of course, your iPhone will take all of that away from you if you let it. And so, you know what I mean? You can be just as busy in a digital kind of iteration as not before. But yeah, rest is a central, deep passion of my heart and a deep thing. And again, I think it's a great myth that activity equals productivity. And I don't think the science is behind that. We've read those. I'm sure you've read this stuff. But a couple of months ago, after the book came out, or I would have put it in the book, there was 2 big things that happened. Microsoft tried a 4-day work week in Japan. And this other high influential company tried a 5-hour workday, but they made people leave their phones at the door, and they blocked like social media accounts and stuff from people's laptops. And in both cases, one was like they worked 9 to 1, I think it was 5 hours a day. And the other was a 4-day work week. Productivity went up by 40%. 40%.
Unbelievable.
And so the reality is we just waste insane amounts of time, especially those of us that kind of have to do some work in the digital space like we're doing right now and have to be on our phone at some level, and the difference at just the pure math between somebody who works 80 hours a week and between somebody who works 50, it's so negligible. They say that after 55 hours, which is about 6 days of work, your productivity plummets,
Wow.
So I just think that, it's a myth that, we should rest rather than be productive. We should rest to be productive. In fact, the more important, the more in demand your job, your life is, the more important rest is. You're a sports guy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not a sports guy, but I've been learning a lot about like the category, and forgive me if I'm way off here because I know just enough to be dangerous. But I'm interested in like the psychology of sports. And and the idea of load management is a really interesting idea, which started out, I think, in baseball, where you have this unique phenomenon where a pitcher can only do so many throws. And like the star pitcher in this example is what gets the team to, the World Series. But then you get to the World Series and he can't pitch all of the games or he'll throw out his arm. And so there's this really unique psychology there. And then in the NBA, my understanding is it's really controversial right now because, you know, you don't want, like, trainers are recognizing a player as a holistic being, not just a body or a group of muscles. There's a mental toll, an emotional toll, there's a central nervous system. So the most important players actually need to rest more. And what's LeBron James sleeps like 11 or 12 hours a night or something like that, and has a kitchen staff and like hyper meticulous about rest. I read this great book on Olympians, and it said what separates the elite from the professional was not how hard they train, but how hard they rest.
Wow.
And it was basically saying, once you get to that level of athleticism, everybody's training at the same level of diligence. What really separates the greats are how seriously they take rest. And for us as followers of Jesus, whether you're an elite athlete, you know, or a CEO of a major company, or just a mom or a graphic designer who's like trying to make like a business, or just, you know, we're nobody famous or whatever. Like, there's something to rest that at a psycho-spiritual level is an expression of our trust in God. Do we trust that there is a God running the universe? And it's not Rich Wilkerson, it's not John Mark Comer, it's not me. God is God. I'm creature, not machine, and I embrace my mortality and my finitude.
Well, and I think you bring up something that's so important as we're talking about that, in the idea that as I rest, it's requiring me to trust God, which I'm learning more and more about. Things that require me to trust God also require discipline around that, systems and plans and practices. In your latest book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which I think almost all of our team, we've been telling our staff to read it, and we promoted it at our church, and so many people have gotten so many great testimonies and stories from it. But you had something you talked about in the book that happened to you a couple of years ago that was quite significant. Would you mind maybe just sharing a little bit about that, what happened in your life that created some change?
Are you referring to like kind of burnout, leading the church kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
just because we've got so many leaders and whatnot that are watching right now. And that's what I want to get at for people in terms of, I think a lot of your message came from a place of burnout.
Yeah. You know, I mean, dude, the sad thing is it's, I don't even really need to tell you the story, because it's the common trope of type A person started something, some really good intentions mixed with a lot of ego and shadow, and went really hard and burned out and caused some damage along the way. You know, it's such a common story. It's so sad. Like, why do we have to learn that from the inside out, you know? But yeah, planted a church and it grew really fast. But I just, you know, I didn't have the emotional maturity or even really the emotional wiring from God to function in that kind of a role. And, you know, that's a really scary thing, in particular for pastors, when your gifting outpaces your just emotional and spiritual maturity, and when it often puts you into situations that you're really not made for. So, you know, Portland's a big design city. One of the main things, you know, that we run out of here at a business level is advertising agencies. And a lot of the designers in our church I talk to, they'll get in this weird thing where they keep getting promoted if they're really good at design. And then they end up in like an executive management role. And advertising is like, they're like the one like artists that are like all hustle culture, workaholic kind of people, you know, like crazy hours, fast turnaround, on demand, you know, hey, we need this thing for Coca-Cola by Thursday. Very, you know, multiple marriages kind of stereotype, you know. And they'll talk about this dynamic where they're really artists and they keep getting promoted because they're so good at their craft. And then they end up in management working 80, 90 hours a week. And they're like, no, they're not a manager. That's the next step up. That's where they make more money. That's the career thing. That's how they get the next gig. But it's not actually who they were made to be. And so that can happen, you know, if you're a communicator in a church culture, you can kind of just get put into this, well, therefore you should be the lead pastor of this large church. Therefore you should oversee there. And you're like, well, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should work for somebody else doing that. I'm literally trying to hire somebody else to lead our church so I can just teach and help people pray. That's really kind of the main thing I want to do, you know?
Well, and I think that in the book, this idea of hurry culture, I love what you're leaning into, because so many people right now are chasing a dream or happiness, and it's really about more, bigger. The bigger it gets, the happier I'm going to be. I need to go faster. I need to keep up. Who are we keeping up with? We're running so fast. What do you think this is doing to our souls? Because This is the question that I've been asking myself since August, after I was really leaning into some of the things you were teaching about as I've read the book. It's funny we're talking about COVID-19 right now, because I really made major progress. You might say it's baby steps, but it was massive steps for me with just my devices and my phone.
Yes.
Social.
Amazing.
But COVID, it's like I'm relapsing. I got to go to rehab again afterwards.
Same here.
We were putting great boundaries and parameters around our dinner table, things of that nature, just steps. What do you think this hurry culture is doing to our souls? And you're in Portland. I'm in Miami. These are not slow places. This is fast pace.
Yeah. I mean, Thomas Merton, I don't quote him a lot because if you know his story, it really did not end well. But he had this great line that hurry is a form of contemporary violence. And, it's violent because it kills all sorts of really important things. It kills not just like inner sense of peace and I'm calm and happy in the moment, but it kills love. It kills your capacity for attention. It kills your capacity to live in the spirit moment by moment. The basic thesis of my book is really just that hurry is incompatible with love. So my call to slow down isn't just, hey, slow down, man, so you're less stressed out and you have a better life. And that's great. I'm sure Jesus would want me to feel less stressed out. But life is hard and full of suffering. And, Paul said, I face daily the pressure of all the churches. And Jesus said, in this world, you will face trouble. Be of good cheer. I've overcome the world, but you will face trouble. That's like a promise we don't normally claim from God, but it's a promise, So life is hard. I mean, there's no way around that. Anybody tells you different is selling you something. So it's not just like, how do we feel better? It's how do we actually adopt the pace of Jesus? I quote this Japanese theologian, Kosuke Koyama, in the book, who has this beautiful little essay. You can read it. It's just a couple pages long, called 3 Mile an Hour God. And I had to Google, I'm like, 3 mile an hour. Apparently 3 miles per hour is the speed that you walk at. Unless if you're a New Yorker, then it's like 10 mile per hour God. But,
I like that.
World, 3 miles per hour. And he just has this great thing about how, we walk with God. We don't run with God. And there's this, and he talks about the pace of love and how if God wasn't love, he would go faster. But because God is love, he slows down. So just to get very practical, I'm a dad. I have 3 kids and a wife, and I'm a type A personality. When I am in a hurry, my worst moments as a husband and father are when I'm in a hurry and when I'm exhausted. When I'm under stress and I'm tense and I'm not rested and I'm late and I'm trying to get my 3 kids out of the house on time for church to preach about slowing down or whatever. Dude, that is when I am sarcastic and I'm harsh and I'm get in the car right now. And one kid, I don't have time to talk about that. Get in the car right now. Why are you always late? And just stop talking and get in the car. Like the worst aspects of me that do damage to the people I love the most come out when I'm in that place of hurry, overload, exhaustion, fatigue, tension. I'm not a loving person. And we could run it through the same rubric of Paul's, kind of the New Testament, his tripart thing of love, joy, and peace. The same is true for joy and the same is true for peace. When was the last time you felt like deeply at peace in your soul when you were late for a flight? You know what I mean? And you're like stuck in traffic. You're like, it's just the worst. Hurry, dude. It just is a deal breaker if you want to live in the kingdom of God with Jesus.
It's beautiful what you're saying. In terms of that moment for burnout for you, what was some of the turning points where you began to discover a new way of life? Was it teaching that you heard, or you just said, I can't keep going like this? Do you feel like I guess what I'm getting at is that sometimes it seems like there's 2 ways to learn, right? Like you can either hit rock bottom or you can listen to John Mark Comer right now or get good teaching.
Yes.
Do you feel like that burnout was a catalyst for you in terms of a new way of lifestyle for you, or are you still tempted to go back to that type of pace? Like, is there a governor on you with your disciplines? Is that what you're naturally, would you naturally try to run that fast, or were you trying to just keep up with what you thought you had to do?
The answer to both those questions is yes. It was more than burnout that set me on a different trajectory, and we can come back to that conversation. It was a stark wake-up call to who I was becoming. We can come back to that if you want. It wasn't just burnout. It was spiritual formation, or whatever you want to call it. Am I tempted to go back to it? Yes, every single day. Do I want to in the depth of my heart? No, not at all. God saved me from that. But, you know, I mean, every single, this is an interesting thing. I'm sure you're feeling this too at, you know, in your mid 30s. But one of my best friends and I, we talk about this a lot, how there's a weird thing where right when your career, I hate to use that word as a pastor because it's, you know, we don't like to think about it that way. Work, whatever, ministry, whatever you want to call it, is kind of at its zenith, where like there's more work for you to do, you're more in demand than ever before, is right at the time when you're in your kind of mid 30s through 50, where you are most needed as a dad, depending on when you had kids. If you follow, like, psychologists normally talk about the primary emotional caregiver for a child, especially for boys, but for a child going mom, dad, mentor. And they'll kind of say, and this is like not chauvinistic, this is like a secular psychology thing. Mom is kind of 0 to 6 or 9. Dad is like 6 to 9 through the teenage years. And then mentor is like kind of 16 and up. You always need dad, mom, and you always need everybody. But that real like deep need, it's kind of for mommy when they're really little. And then all 3 of my kids have come into the dad stage, you know? And so, man, I just need to be more present to my kids now than ever. Every single day, I face a temptation to prioritize my work over my family and my phone over what's actually happening in front of me. Not a day goes by, you know, and with the devices, and I have devices, they do good in the world, but they're literally engineered to take you away from the present moment, distract you, addict you, to manipulate you and monetize your attention. Like that's literally what they're designed for.
I found myself, I get angry at the addiction sometimes. The other day, I threw it. I was like, I'm sick of this, man. Like it's wasting too much time. Some of the language that I've been learning from you that I love so much, I want you to kind of weigh into it, is you use this phrase a lot, apprenticeship to Jesus. Yeah. And talking about the way of Jesus and being like Jesus and becoming like Jesus. So much of this, I read Richard Foster's book on celebration of discipline. I hate to tell you, but like, yeah, I was taught meditation, but not really. Right. Yeah, I think I kind of heard a sub point about solitude, but no one's ever said, man, no one's ever been like, Rich, no, I don't do solitude, man. I do peace. So maybe just talk about some of that language and just, I want, once again, people at VuComp just to, maybe it's an introduction, maybe for other people it's review, but talk about that language and where that comes from and what that means to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, dude, you know all of this. The word Christian is barely used at all in the New Testament, 2 or 3 times, never as really like an identity statement from followers of Jesus. The 2 words that are used to self-identify are mathetes is the Greek word, which is normally translated disciple, and adelphoi, which is normally translated brothers and sisters or family. So we're disciples and we're family. Like that's what it is to be Jesus people in the church, you know? Amen. And disciple is a word that we're kind of used to. The problem is it's not really a word used in modern English. So what Christians do is they then import kind of a weird set of assumptions. For example, you know, a lot of people think a disciple is like a really mature person. That's not true at all. Have you read about Peter? No. Or people think that, most people use disciple as a verb, like, Rich, who are you discipling? Or who discipled you? Which is, again, not bad. It's never used as a verb anywhere in the New Testament, just as a noun. And if you put a synonym in there, you would never say, Rich, who are you Christianing? Or who Christianed you? Who are you believering? Or who believered you? You'd be like, what are you even talking about? You either are or you aren't a Christian. You either are a believer. This person played a key role in my life, and this person was a mentor, and this person was a teacher. But like, what are you talking about? Believered me? That's what, discipled me. We use that language. And there's an important thing there, because if disciple is a verb, if it's something that is done to you, then it puts the onus of responsibility for you to grow and mature to become like Jesus onto somebody else. If disciple is a noun, if it's something you are, that you choose to be, then it puts the onus of responsibility onto you to follow Jesus. So why we use the word apprentice is partially just because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around discipleship, and what people say when they say discipleship, they either mean one-on-one mentorship, or they mean leadership development, or they mean in-depth Bible study. All 3 fabulous things. We do them, we're for them, but we don't call them discipleship. We call them mentorship, leadership development, and Bible study, you know? Discipleship, the reason we use the word apprentice, the Greek word's mathetes, and it was a technical term from the Jewish educational system in that day. It was actually started by the philosophers. So Aristotle was a mathetes of Socrates. He was a student learning from Socrates how to be a great mind and philosopher. And that's how the rabbis used it for their actual students that would literally follow them around, learn from their yoke, a Jewish way of saying their set of teachings. And eventually that was how it was like an apprenticeship program, how they were trained to become rabbis themselves and traveling from synagogue to synagogue. And this is a language that Jesus uses. And so a lot of Greek scholars have argued that the best English word we have, there's different ways you can translate it. Disciple's great, student is another one. But then again, we think of like university student, like I go to class and take notes and then I go back to my life. So a lot of them argue apprentice is the best word for it, best translation of it, because that's what it was. Like to apprentice under a rabbi was to follow him around, to make it your whole life goal to become like him, not just to get lectures from him, to actually emulate this rabbi and then to become eventually a rabbi yourself and do what he would do. So we kind of break apprenticeship to Jesus down into three basic goals of be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and then do what he would do if he were you, you know? So that's kind of our working model of what it means to follow Jesus or apprentice under Jesus.
Well, I heard you say one time, and I really like it. We all wear the "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets down here in Miami, but I do think that you introduce a deeper concept, which is what would Jesus do if he were you?
Yes, because you're a single celibate Jewish guy from the first century. What if you're like a mom or a grandma or like, you know, how would you know?
No, I think it's absolutely incredible. And I'm trying to figure out how we can put that on the bracelet now, though. I'm trying to figure out what the letters would be, but it would be, I just like that language so much. I think the way that you explain it, especially if I'm talking to people that are new to church culture, which so many of us in our church in Miami, it's like, this is the first place they've ever been to. And you start using words like, I'm going to disciple you. They're like, what are you even talking about?
What does that even mean?
And I think that language of apprenticeship, it so clearly begins to define that I'm trying to live like this guy. I'm trying to do what he did. And just the model of how you guys have broken that down, it's really got us in Miami looking at how we're programming and how we're living and examining ourselves. And this is so much of the reason why I wanted to get you on here today. I'm curious, some of your thoughts just on things like technology and things like social media. We're kind of talking right now about how these things can become addictive and these things can be in many ways detrimental to your soul. We know they're tools, but many times it kind of feels like the tools end up using us. Has any of your thinking shifted? I mean, in this cultural moment that we find ourselves in, like, are you kind of like, maybe we need that more than we don't? We're on a Zoom right now. We're thankful for technology. Can you just weigh into some of that? Because sometimes it's used for good. Sometimes it's catering. A lot of this, it's pushing what we don't want to see keep happening in the church. Like there's a comparison culture. There's a portrayal. I just would love to get some of your thoughts on that. And I'm not trying to, I want you to speak into us, help Vu a little bit.
Well, dude, no. I mean, no, I have more questions than answers on all of that. I mean, here's the reality. This technology has been designed to manipulate us. So we're on a Zoom call right now. It is recording this conversation. Algorithm somewhere, if I understand correctly, is analyzing the words that we're saying in order to then sell that data to marketers to then manipulate me through advertising. So right now I could go Adidas, Yeezy. And probably if I Google something after this, whoa, an Adidas advertisement will come up. What a shock. And it's designed to get me to spend money. It's designed to get me to think a certain way about socio-political issues, and often designed to get me to vote in a certain way and to think that I chose this position rather than was manipulated by the power brokers today. That is this technology. I mean, economists call it the attention economy. It's literally designed to take your attention through distraction and addiction, things like scrolling on Instagram, things like the like button. All of this is at a neurobiological level. I mean, Tristan Harris, if you're familiar with his work, if not, Google Tristan Harris, worked for Google, was a design philosopher, started a nonprofit now, who's basically trying to get a Hippocratic oath for software designers because he's seen behind the curtain. And he basically argues that when Silicon Valley started, things like the like button, things like scrolling, all of it was based on slot machines. They went and studied gambling. If you think of a slot machine where, people go in, you put a quarter in, and it's all like the house always wins. But there's that psychology, and they don't let you win every time. They let you win. And neurobiologically, a slot machine and checking for text messages or notifications on your phone shows up in your brain the exact same way, the exact same addiction. It's the same thing. So now does that mean that we should throw our phones away and go become monks? Yeah. Maybe. But here's how I've been thinking about it. Paul, the Apostle Paul, utilized the Roman system of legal rights and of roads and transportation and of letters that was designed for oppression. It was designed to increase the empire, conquer nations, and get greater taxation to make the rich richer. He subverted what it was designed for and used it to spread the gospel through the Mediterranean to where in 3 centuries, over half of the empire were followers of Jesus.
Wow.
So we have to first just be honest about what technology is. It is designed to distract us and addict us and manipulate us. Anybody that says differently is living in a fantasy. Now, that means if we're going to interact with it, we have to do so in a discerning way, in a ruthless way, in a disciplined way, and our intent has to be to subvert it. So how do you take a Zoom call and do great good in the world? How do you take Instagram and not just make it look like your life is perfect and you're always happy and, and if you do this, you'll be like, how do you just actually use it to subvert those narratives? And that's hard to do. And I don't have all the answers to that. And on a regular basis, this morning we're at the end of a building project for our church. And so I posted I'm trying to post pictures of the remodel project because our church is like dying to meet together. We've all given money to this. And, we're supposed to dedicate the building 2 weeks ago. And so I'm posting for our church to get excited, to just remember that we're together and we want to come back and to have this hope. Then I'm thinking, what if I'm a pastor of a church that doesn't have the money to buy a building? Or I remember how I felt when all of my friends were getting given buildings for their churches. And I'm like, we need to rent and set up and tear down when I'm exhausted, and you just got given this gorgeous facility or whatever. And it makes you feel lame and insecure. And where's God, So I'm in posting, trying to encourage my church, am I discouraging other churches? Man, that to not admit that tension is a great fool's errand, I think, so I think some critical engagement, something as simple as thinking before an Instagram post, what am I trying to make people do, think, or feel by posting this?
There you go.
And then an honest, maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel better. Or maybe I'm just trying to get more followers so I can sell more books. Or maybe I want them to actually really consider this idea. Or maybe I don't want them to do and this would index them and them. Or maybe I really feel like they should go read this passage. Or let me, you know what I mean? And just an honest, don't feel angsty and hate yourself. Why am I posting this? And what do I want people to think, feel, or do as a result? And just pause for a moment and let that inform what you do.
I'm so grateful you're on the conference. We shifted it to go virtual and we decided to name it Hello New World. We don't know
it's a great title.
Know what this new world is, but that's kind of what we're theming a lot of this about. And a lot of the conversations are leaning towards what does this look like? And just lastly, really quick, what are you seeing? And maybe a better word is what are you sensing for what's ahead with the church? And that could be positive. That could also be the concern. I don't know. I'm more putting it in the ball in your corner just as we're closing here. What are you seeing, sensing with the church? And
I think the most honest answer to that, Rich, is I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of prediction out there. And, I think sometimes prediction is really smart people who know but a lot of the time it's just an attempt to grasp for control. And at its best, any form of prediction right now, whether it's from a top-ranking epidemiologist or a politician or a pastor about the future of the church, at its best, I think it's educated conjecture. And so I think we actually can really help people as pastors, I think part of our role is to help people live with the I don't know and the uncertainty and make peace with that. Like cancer, people that have been through cancer talk about how the best doctors, I've not been through it by the grace of God, but talk about how the best doctors aren't necessarily the smartest ones that make the best predictions. They're the ones that kind of say, here's a few different ways it could go. You could live this long or that, but we don't know, but I'm with you. And I kind of wonder if the same could be said for pastors, that the best pastors and leaders aren't necessarily the ones that are like crazy smart and they're like, it's going to last this long and this is what's going to happen and this is what's going to happen in the church, but are a little bit more like, man, the world, we've never been through a global pandemic in the digital age with modern understanding of germs. Never happened before. And so my guess, that's all this is guess, is Jesus teaching that to those who have, more will be given. And to those who do not have, even what they have will be taken away. Scientists even have a name for that phenomenon. There's an interesting thing like in music. It's like 1% of professional musicians make 99% of royalties. And it's the same for literature. Basically, a couple authors float the entire publishing industry. And so there's something there. I think that strong churches will get stronger. And just as my guess, weak churches will get weaker or even die. Barna's projecting for 100,000 churches to close their doors as the result. Again, that's all educated conjecture. Some of that's really sad. Some of that, I think there's a life cycle to churches. Yeah. Some of that could be healthy, and some of that could be renewal. So I think there's a stripping away, a pruning right now in Jesus' metaphor. The church is being cut back. Like, what are we actually about? What is life actually about? Do we need all the sound and the lights and the things? And what is the church? There's a pruning. But I think there's more than that. There's a stripping away and a reseeding. So I think there is more creativity from the Spirit in people's imagination right now than I've ever seen. I'm seeing more entrepreneurs, more people dreaming, more innovation, more creativity, more people having literal prophetic dreams as they sleep for their future, more people discovering their destiny, more people asking hard questions about what do I actually want to do as I come back? How do we come back differently, not just the same? I don't want to go back to the way it was. So, man, I think for people that are young and thinking and entrepreneur, like all of us, but especially in that demographic, should really be paying attention to their creativity right now. Amen. What is the Spirit of God seeding in your heart?
So good. John Mark Comer, ladies and gentlemen, Bridgetown Church. John Mark, we're so grateful for you. And hopefully, I don't know. I don't think you have any enemies in this world, but you definitely don't have any enemies in Miami. We are praying for you. We love you. We're so grateful for your voice. We think it's really, really needed. And we can't wait to get you down here to Miami because you're part of the family now. And so we're so grateful you take some time. Thank you for all that you do. We love you so much. So much love, guys, on social and in the chats right now. Make sure he feels it for sure. I love you, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, same to you. Thank you for your kindness.